Next up, we have George Peterson, who Jesse was just talking about. And we are going to be talking about meditation and the superpower for addiction recovery. So before we get into our conversation with George, I'm just going to play a little bit of a clip from one of the podcasts that we did a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this event. And George has very quickly become a really good friend of mine. I can feel really intuitively connected to George. Really powerful work that he's doing at the moment, and he's actually the founder of the Jordan Hanna Recovery Group that we're donating to. So he's doing a lot of amazing work out in the world.
And that's why, there's a great saying that says, I'm sure you've heard it probably, what we don't reveal, we can't heal. Mm. And, another saying is better out than in. Mm-hmm. And that's why, the meditation, to bring it back to the meditation each time, is so powerful, because our body's a perfect accountant. And so stress stores itself in our cellular memory, right? We have stored in our cellular memory what is known as stress triggers, which is a trigger alert highlighting sensations related to past stress. Mm. And so when we start to meditate, especially, using one of the Vedic techniques, you actually start to produce a higher quality rest chemical. And the higher quality rest chemical starts to go down into the cells and boot out some of those deep stress triggers that are stored inside of us. And so it's a way to release some of those, traumas that are stored in our cellular memory, that, may, up until this point, not even be known to us. And so that's another reason why in our training, we don't just give people their mantra and send them on their way. Because, just like knowledge without experience is just an intellectual exercise, mm-hmm. Experience without knowledge can be scary and confusing. So if in the middle of meditation, you start releasing a childhood trauma that you didn't even remember happened to you, you start thinking about something that you hadn't thought about in a very long time, or you start thinking about something that you didn't even remember happened. If you don't understand what's happening, and you don't understand that that's your body releasing the backlog of stress that we all have, then you're probably never going to want to meditate again. Yeah. And so it's just another reason why it's so important to have a teacher, so they can help you better understand these experiences, so when they happen, they're not as confusing and scary, and so you can, again, be reminded, better out than in. Yeah. Right? The stress just can't magically disappear. So if it's going to leave our body, we're going to have to experience it to some degree again. There's a difference between being sober and not drinking. Right. And I'm talking about, when I talk about sober, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Right. And so for me, the number one tool I have to cultivate that in my life on a daily basis is meditation. When I learned how to meditate, I was able to access my own inner happiness, my own inner reservoir of bliss chemicals. Okay. And so, yeah, it is so important, because it's cliche, and if you're in recovery, you may have heard this, but people say, like, hey, if you take away a bone from a dog, like, you got to replace it with something better. Yeah. And I can tell you this, and whoever's listening this, that, the things that have come to me ever since I committed to sobriety and started meditating twice a day on a daily basis are better than anything I could ever imagine. And so, as far as using goes, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't have any fun using. Like, there was a ton of different times where I had a blast, but the bad times far outweighed the good. But I can tell you today that even the bad, I would never, ever trade the bad times I have today for the good times I had while I was using.
Awesome, brother. So let's bring on George. There you are. Oh. There we go. All right. Welcome to the Recovering Me podcast. Not the podcast, the virtual summit. That's such a reflex. So thank you so much for joining us today, man. I love an awesome little clip I got from the talk that we had before. And I feel like I've learned so much from you already. I remember the first time we talked, man, when I shared with you about this idea that I had for this summit. Your response to me actually made me cry. I'd never met you in my life. I'd never even, I had no really awareness about, your work or anything. And we just had a conversation, and, the message that you sent to me about how the people that are out there that need support is really a big part of why we're here. So I want to appreciate and acknowledge you for, the impact that you've had in the short time that we've got to know each other, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. I'm appreciative of the impact you've had on me in the short time I've gotten to know you. And like you said, I kind of feel like we've made like a soul contract. Maybe we made a contract. Our souls made a contract before we came here to Earth. So I'm grateful to know you. And I also just want to give a shout out to Jesse Harless, our previous speaker, and Julie Riesler, our first speaker, because without either of them who connected me with you, I wouldn't be here today. And they've done a lot to support me on my path of recovery. And so just want to give a shout out to them for all the help that they've given me on this journey.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, even before we get started, like for the people that are out there, I think because one of the things that's so powerful is community, right? Jesse was talking about the tribe and the community aspect of the recovery process, and obviously you guys have had made that connection through recovery, and now you have a relationship that you keep building on. And so for the people that are out there, sometimes they feel like sometimes we feel like, I know that I did when I first started. I went to my first couple of meetings, and it was like in the basement of a church, and people are smoking and drinking coffee, and it was like, do I fit in here? How does this work in my life? And so I wasn't really present to community at that time. But what's really one of the powerful aspects of the recovery process is the beautiful people that you grow with.
100%. Yeah. Community. It's, for me, one of the three most important aspects of my sober recovery.
Yeah. Amazing. So I guess before we get started, like George is an East Coast-based meditation teacher and the co-founder of Nourish Mindful Events, which is a company that hosts retreats and pop-ups and provides a space for people feeding their minds, bodies, and souls. And before George started meditating, he was regularly making unhealthy decisions for his well-being. And after being introduced to the transformative practice of Vedic meditation, which we'll get into, George went on to study meditation with the likes of Deepak Chopra and Emily Fletcher. And today, following years of meditation and Vedic studies, he has guided thousands of people to begin and grow their own meditation practice. And he's also the host of the Global Shifts podcast and is currently working on his first book that will offer steps for creating an enjoyable meditation practice and overcoming addiction.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Grateful to be here.
Awesome, brother.
Yeah.
So I guess just start off by sharing with us the role that addiction played in your life, and specifically the role that meditation played in helping you get sober.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. Really grateful to be here and super fired up, like you said, by the speakers who came on before. Makes me want to dive deeper than I ever have into my spiritual practices and my sober recovery.
Mhm.
So super excited to be here, getting a ton of value out of this. So thank you for hosting this. It's needed, like you said, more than ever right now. I loved how on your site you put how overdose rates have gone up more than 30% since the beginning of March. And so this is powerful. It's needed. It's needed to create the global shift. And that's what I'm all about. So yeah, just to share a little bit of my story. Um, you know, uh, Hindsight's 2020. I can look back on my life and see that I was always looking for an outside fix for an inside job. Um, and I was in what my first meditation teacher, Dr. Deepak Chopra, would call a state of object referral, which means my happiness was dependent upon people, places, and circumstances. And when there was a lot of fun people, places, and circumstances going on in my life, I felt really good. And when fun people, places, and circumstances weren't around, I felt restless, irritable, discontent. I felt uneasy. I felt never satisfied. I felt easily annoyed. Um, One of my meditation teachers, a guy by the name of Light Watkins, he has an amazing book called Bliss More. And in the beginning of Bliss More, he has a quote that says, all of man's problems stem from their inability to sit alone in a room quietly. Um, and that was my experience. I couldn't be with myself by myself and be okay. And so pretty early on, probably 12, 13 years old, I picked up drugs and alcohol for the first time. Alcohol was the first thing I picked up. I remember the first time I drank to get drunk and my life went from black and white to color. I always say now that alcohol and drugs for me were the closest thing to a spiritual awakening that wasn't one. And so they temporarily took away that social anxiety I had, and that restlessness, that irritability, that discontentment, that fear of what other people thought about me. Alcohol temporarily relieved me of that. And so I loved the effect that was produced by alcohol because I knew no other way, to produce a change in the way that I felt. And alcohol and eventually drugs became the first thing that allowed me to experience, as I said, temporary relief from my internal discomfort. And so I ran with drugs and alcohol because I love the effect that was produced by them. And like now understanding drugs and understanding how addiction works, I could see that I had a physical allergy to drugs and alcohol right away. As soon as I put alcohol or drugs into my system, my body craved more because again, I loved the effect that was produced. I knew no other thing that could temporarily relieve me of my fear like drugs and alcohol could. And so one thing led to another. And when I was 15, I was seeking happiness in something outside of myself in the form of a relationship. And it was the prettiest girl in my high school. I was a sophomore. She was a senior. And I asked her, I was in class with her. I happened to know that she wanted to go to a Britney Spears concert. And my sister had tickets and couldn't go. So my mom gave me those tickets and I asked her if she wanted to go. And she said yes. And a couple days before going to that concert, she'd asked me if I'd ever try heroin for the first time. Now I was scared because I was 15. I'd heard all that stuff in dare class about how bad things like heroin were, but I wanted to do anything this girl wanted me to do to be cool and to get in her good graces. And so, really the biggest thing that I was scared of was using a needle. And she's like, no, you can sniff it. And so I was like, whatever I need to do to hopefully end up with this girl, I'm going to do it. And so we went to that Britney Spears concert. And afterwards, they passed around a CD case with lines of heroin on it. And I did heroin for the first time. By the time I was 18, I was a full blown IV drug user in a hopeless state of mind and body. And, I tried to get sober because what would happen is I would use drugs, I would use alcohol, and then I'd hit a bottom, right? I'd go on a spree. I couldn't stop using until something bad would happen. And so like the first time something real bad happened, I got arrested for 8 felony forgery charges. And so I was 18 years old. I just got arrested for 8 felonies. And so I swore off drugs and alcohol. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't want to go to jail. I'm not fit for this. And so if you hooked me up to a lie detector test when, I swore off drugs and alcohol that first time, I would have passed. because I had a sincere desire to not use again. But I didn't realize that the other part of this addiction thing was that I had this thing called an obsession of the mind, which meant I had this repetitive and reoccurring thought, or persistent and reoccurring thought, that was stronger than and didn't respond to reason. Meaning I had this thought in my head that would keep telling me to put my hand on the hot stove one more time. And this time it wasn't going to burn me. And so I would end up after, 30, 60, or 90 days without drugs and alcohol, being restless, irritable, and discontent. The only way I knew to relieve myself of that discomfort was to get high again. So the vicious cycle that I was stuck in would just keep starting over. But during one of my many attempts at getting sober, I tried to meditate. I was feeling a ton of social anxiety. I was feeling discontent. I was on a camping trip with some people in recovery, and I just didn't know how to interact with people sober. And I didn't know what to do to overcome this just gross feeling I had on the inside. So I had this MP3 player with me that I just so happened to have, no coincidences. And it had a guided meditation that my mom had put on there for me. And I remember I laid down in this field and I did it. And it was the first time I ever felt like I was able to tap into my own inner happiness. And it wasn't being dependent on something outside of myself, like drugs and alcohol. So that feeling stuck with me. So I didn't get sober that time. Because today I understand that 50% of success in meditation is determined by consistency. And that was really the only time that I meditated, but that feeling stuck with me. And then other attempts at getting sober, I would try to meditate and that feeling would come back. And I remember all I wanted to do was experience inner happiness. And the only way I knew how to access that was through drugs and alcohol. And so each time I'd meditate, would be kind of blown away. Like, wow, I can feel this way without drugs and alcohol. So that feeling kept sticking with me. So this time when I got sober on August 7th of 2011, that feeling came back. And I remembered meditation gave me access to my own inner happiness. I'm going to try meditating again. And I started a 21-day guided meditation series by Dr. Deepak Chopra, because the idea was that 21 days of doing something would create a new habit. And again, I knew that, if I was going to stay sober, I had to, do things like meditate each and every day. Each day was a day I had to pick up the practice of meditation. And so I meditated for those 21 days, and every single day during those 21 days, I was able to tap into my own inner happiness again. And that feeling stuck with me. So then I contacted Dr. Deepak Chopra Center for Wellbeing, and I literally told them my story. Yeah. I'm like, yo, I'm a hopeless heroin addict. I started using heroin at 15. I've overdosed. I've been arrested for 8 felony forgery charges, all that stuff. And I'm sober now, and meditation's helped me access my own inner happiness. And up until this point, the only way I've known how to access that is through drugs and alcohol. And they're like, oh my God, your story's amazing. And they helped me get on a payment plan to afford going on a very expensive retreat out at their center in Southern California. So I went on that retreat, and then I learned the ancient Vedic meditation technique that I now teach today. And what that technique enabled me to do was learn how to tap into my own, as you heard me say in that video, my own inner reservoir of bliss chemicals. And literally, this is what I'd been looking for my whole life in drugs and alcohol. And meditation had given me access to it. And now through this comprehensive step-by-step 4-day meditation training, I learned the correct mechanics to have that experience almost every time I meditated, and for meditation to become something that I felt was easy and enjoyable. And so at that retreat, they said, write down an intention that you have when you leave here. My intention was to go back there. And so I went back there, and I eventually did their teacher training to teach that technique. And today what I tell people, and this is the last thing I'll say, is that freedom from being discontent that I sought through drugs and alcohol, I found through my meditation practice. So today I've made it my mission to get meditation into as many people's hands in recovery as possible. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah. That's powerful, brother. I appreciate the message, man. That's amazing. And so, and you often call meditation the superpower for recovery, right? So, tell us about why meditation is the superpower for addiction and some of the benefits of the practice of meditation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking me. So, when people seek a change in their emotional state, and they don't know how to produce it from within, they reach for something outside of themselves. Might be drugs, might be alcohol, might be food, might be sex, might be a relationship, might be, as Jesse mentioned, pornography, video games, right? And so one of the things about meditation is meditation helps us to redirect that search for peace from the outside in. It gives us access to those, as I said, our own inner reservoir of bliss chemicals. And so when we know how to access our own inner happiness, then we no longer have to continue to reach for it in things outside of ourselves. And so one of the reasons, I call it the superpower of recovery is because in addition to not only, helping us redirect our search for peace from the outside in, but the benefits are innumerable, the way that it affects the other 23 hours of our day. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions about meditation is we don't meditate to get good at meditation. We meditate to get good at life, right? As one of my meditation teachers who you mentioned in my bio, Emily Fletcher, the co-founder of Ziva Meditation, says, nobody cares that you're good at meditation. Everybody cares that you're good at life. And as a result of meditating, the other 23 hours of your life is going to get better. So that way you'll have less of a desire to seek that change in your emotional state in things outside of yourself, like drugs, like alcohol, like whatever your addiction is. Another thing, if you want to get into the science behind why it's a superpower, part of meditation is that meditation starts to reduce the blood flow to the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for fear. And when we're responding and operating from the amygdala, that part of our brain that is the fear center, we're in the fight, flight, stress reaction. We're restless, we're irritable, we're discontent. And as you heard me say, when we feel that way for too long, we're going to drink again. We're going to reach for our addiction to get out of ourselves. And not only does meditation reduce the blood flow to the amygdala, but it increases the blood flow to the neocortex, which is the part of our brain responsible for good decision making. It helps us see the overall arching picture. So we're able to step back and have a more expanded perception where we're able to pause now and make conscious choices to not behave in the same old limited way. And so, one thing that I tell people today is meditation won't stop your car from not starting, but it will change the way you respond to it, right? And when we can respond to these situations different, then we're going to be less stressed. And stress is one of those other things that really can cause us to drink.
Yeah.
And so really, the benefits are innumerable, and those are just some of them. But as I say, if somebody came to me today and said you could only do one more thing for your sobriety, you can't engage in any of the other positive habits that you do to stay sober on a daily basis. What is that one thing? For me, it would be meditation. You could literally write me $100 million check right now to stop meditating, and I wouldn't take it. Right. And so, that's really why it's the superpower, because it's the most important thing I do on a daily basis to stay sober. It gave me access, that freedom again from being discontent I sought through drugs and alcohol, I now have found through meditation.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. I love what you said, because in one of the short videos I did leading up to this, I talked about the fact that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And what I meant by that is, when you take away the thing that you're using, the solution to your fear and anxiety, like you said, right? The things that we get dependent on are that's the solution to the fear and to the anxiety and to the disconnection that we're feeling. So when you take that thing away, you're left with all these really just raw emotions that are in your face that you've never really had to deal with before, because every time you feel that problem, you have a solution, right? Which is, whatever your numbing choice is. And I think that's why, for me, I agree with what you said so much, because the meditation is what allows you to be able to create a little bit of space between, the stimulus and the response, and helps you be able to deal with a lot of that fear you're talking about.
Yeah, it gives you a buffer zone between the time a stress factor shows up and between the time you respond to it, so you can respond as opposed to react. And
Yeah.
if you go back to the clip that you shared, it's like, you're right. Drugs and alcohol aren't the problem. They're the solution to our problem. And so the problem is, like you said, we have not a drinking problem, but a thinking problem. And so we have all this trauma, this old trauma. And as you heard in the video, we store that stuff in our cellular memory. And the deep healing rest meditation goes in and starts to boot that stuff up and out.
Yeah. And just like you said, the world's not going to change, right? You're going to have to deal with the same stress, all that same stuff. So you need strategies to be able to work with that. So I know so there's so many different kinds of meditation that are out there, right? I'm sure people that are on this call, probably everybody's at least dipped their toe in the water when it comes to meditation. But sometimes it can be confusing because there's so many different kinds, right? And I know that the kind that you teach and use is it's unique, right? So share a little bit about the type of meditation that you use.
Sure. So I'll break it down, talking about the three kind of main forms of meditation that there are these days. So the first kind is called focused attention meditation techniques, right? And so in these kind of techniques, you might have a point of focus, right? And if I want you to think about the analogy of the ocean, right? So you have the ocean and then you have the waves on the surface of the ocean. We've probably all been to the ocean and seen the waves. And so I want you to think about the waves on the surface of the ocean as the 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day we have on average as human beings. UCLA's Laboratory of Mental Imaging did a study that on average, we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. That's a thought every 1.2 seconds, right? And so focused attention meditation techniques are techniques where you have a point of focus and maybe your attention drifts away, like maybe it's your breath, maybe it's a candle, and then you bring your attention back to that point of focus, almost to drive the other thoughts out of your awareness when they come. And so that's kind of like trying to stop the waves on the surface of the ocean. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever gone to the ocean and tried to stop the waves on the surface, you're probably not going to be very successful. And so there'll be moments where, the waves slow down and feel like they stop, but it's going to always feel like you're being bombarded by the waves. And then there's another form of meditation called open monitoring. So my fiance's brother does a technique. It's called leaves on a stream. So what he does is he closes his eyes. Every time a thought comes, he imagines himself placing the thought on a leaf and gently letting it go down the stream. And so open monitoring meditation techniques are techniques where the thoughts come and then we witness them and we let them go. So those techniques are kind of like trying to be unaffected by the waves on the surface of the ocean. If you've ever gone to the ocean and tried to stand in the water and be unaffected by the waves, it's probably not going to be too easy either. And so what I teach is a form of meditation called automatic self-transcending. And so if you think about the waves on the surface of the ocean, if you did a cross-section picture of the ocean, which is a picture that looks at the top and the bottom simultaneously, you would see that even when there's all these crazy waves on the surface, at the bottom, where it's 100 feet deep, for say, things are calm, things are still, things are silent. Same with your mind. Underneath the 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, there's calm, there's stillness, there's silence. It's just most of us haven't been taught how to easily traverse from the busy surface focused thinking zone of our mind, where those 60 to 80,000 thoughts are, down to the quiet zone where there's calm, there's stillness, there's silence underneath. And so in the training I teach a 4-day comprehensive step-by-step meditation training. People learn how to easily traverse from the surface, where that busy surface focused thinking zone of our mind is, where the waves are, down to that quiet zone, down to our own inner reservoir of bliss chemicals. And so meditation is sort of like a car, right? Car is super beneficial. Like one of the gifts of sobriety, I've got to move to Southern California. I live back on the East Coast now, but I drove my car there and back, right? But if I didn't know how to drive, then the car wouldn't have been able to get me where I wanted to go, right? And so if I don't understand meditation's correct mechanics, then I'm not going to be able to easily traverse from that busy surface down to the quiet zone below. And so one of the problems is that the difficult experiences are being seen as correct meditation. So if you guys on this call have heard the saying, there's no wrong way to meditate, that's a, saying that's often tossed around. It's actually not true, because if I'm, standing on my head, eating bananas and calling that meditation, I'm probably not going to get the same benefits as what you'd learn doing a training like mine. And so what's there no wrong way to meditate really means is that there's many different approaches, but just like anything that has many different approaches, there's still best practices. And when you understand meditation's best practices, you're going to learn how to make meditation work for you instead of feeling like you have to work hard to meditate. And so in the training like mine and in the training like the one I did, you learn meditation's best practices. So meditation can literally become one of the easiest, most enjoyable things you do all day long. The last thing I'll say is a lot of people meditate, like you said. Most people on this call probably dip their toe at least into the practice of meditation. I don't really have to convince people these days that meditating on a daily basis would be good for them. However, a lot of people meditate because they're disciplined. Not a lot of people meditate because it's the easiest, most enjoyable thing they do all day long. And today I can sit here and tell you that I plan my entire day around my morning and evening meditation. It's the easiest, most enjoyable thing I do all day long.
Mm. Awesome. And the new book, and the book that you have coming out, that's coming out at the moment, that is about the mechanics. Is that right?
Yeah. So it doesn't go as deep as obviously my 4-day meditation training does. The book is inspired by that training. Here's the thing: the training that I teach, it's 4 days. Each day is 90 minutes to 2 hours. So by the end of that training, you have about 8 hours worth of understanding the correct mechanics of meditation. And so by the end of that training, you literally know more than 90% of people out there meditating. However, in this book, all of what I'm teaching in the book is inspired by what's in that training. Now, you're not going to learn everything you'd learn in the training. However, you are going to learn some of the mechanics that can make meditation more easy and enjoyable. So Jesse talked about his acronym FEARS. So I created an acronym too for my book, because me and Jesse and my other friends, we joke around, we call meditation Medi. We're like, did you do your Medi today? So I'm like, how could I turn Medi into an acronym that teaches people how to make meditation more easy and enjoyable? So I'll run through them real quick if we have time for that.
Yep.
So the M's, and I won't, obviously tell you everything about each of the letters, but just to give you a general overview, the M stands for meditate effortlessly. And so it's much more than what I'm about to tell you now. But one of the things I tell people in the chapter on meditating effortlessly is to sit comfortably with back support. What do we think about when we think about meditation? If you Google meditation right now, you're going to see somebody sitting with their legs crossed, their back perfectly straight, no back support, their fingers in a mudra like this, what they call in yoga, even though they don't even know why their fingers are in that position. And so one of the things that I suggest is that you want to sit comfortably with back support, because there's really two main forms of meditation. One that was best suited for a monk, but none of us are monks, so we wouldn't be on this call. And one that's best suited for a householder, which is an everyday person like me and you, who still wants to experience meditation's benefits, but doesn't want to be a monk. And so those techniques that ask you to sit with your back perfectly straight and your legs crossed, your fingers in a mudra, those are techniques that were best suited for a monk. And so when householders try to practice techniques that were best suited for a monk, their experiences are very difficult. So that's one of the parts of meditating effortlessly. The second letter is expect your mind to wander. As Emily Fletcher, I'll go back to her. I love some of the analogies she uses. She says, the mind thinks involuntarily, like the heart beats involuntarily. So trying to give your mind a command to stop is like trying to give your heart a command to stop. So on the count of 5, I want you to give your heart a command to stop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How'd that work out for you? And so trying to give our mind a command to stop is going to probably work out just as good. And so we want to expect our mind to wander. And I talk a little bit about how actually those thoughts that we all don't want to have while we're meditating are actually the signs of the mechanics of stress being released from our body while we're meditating. And so a thought-filled meditation is just your body releasing stress in the form of thoughts. And so I direct people's attention back to, rather than looking for the benefits of meditation while you're meditating, look from the other 23 hours of the day. The next letter, D, stands for detach and surrender, which means have no expectations, right? And surrender to whatever happens while you're meditating. And so, this is inspired by this saying that one of my other teachers I mentioned, like Watkins, says, which is that success in meditation is determined by the extent to which we are nonchalant with all of our experiences. Another thing Emily Fletcher says that ties into this is, um, thoughts are not the enemy of meditation, effort is, right? So it's just about detaching and surrendering to whatever happens while we're meditating, and trusting that as long as we implement the correct mechanics, whatever happens after that happens for good. And so then the I is integrate slowly back into activity. And so this is one of meditation's most overlooked steps. And so what this is about taking a minute or two at the end of your meditation after you're done meditating to sit there with your eyes closed before slowly integrating back into activity. Because especially with like the technique I teach in my training, it's been scientifically verified to give you rest 2 to 5 times deeper than sleep, right? So it's like being in the deepest sleep you've ever gotten and then being woken up abruptly, right? If anybody's ever been in a deep sleep and woken up abruptly, how'd that make you feel? Probably a little irritable, right? Yeah. And so you can actually get the meditation, what we call in my training, the meditation bends, right? It's going to have a reverse effect on you and actually make you a little bit irritable. It's like when a scuba diver comes up to the surface too quick and they get the bends, right? It's going to have a bunch of adverse effects you don't want. And so it's about integrating slowly back into activity. So some of that peace and some of that bliss can start to carry with you out into your day and positively impact the other 23 hours of your day. And so I go deep into, that acronym in the book, and I talk to people about how this practice can be used to overcome negative habits and addictive behaviors.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. And I know for me as well, whether it's personal development or the meditation stuff that I've done, definitely having immersive events where you go and you spend, longer periods of time it's not, if you could do 100 meditations that are 30 minutes and it wouldn't be the same as doing, going to like a 3 or 4 day thing like you have and going deep. Because it has such a transformative impact instead of just a little bit of a progressive kind of growth. There's
totally agree.
Okay, so last thing is you could just share a little bit about so you have the Nourish Mini or the Mindful Minis that for the people that do donate today and they get the bundle, they'll get the Nourish Mindful Minis. So can you briefly share about one, what is the Nourish Mindfulness Events, right? Like what do you guys do there? And then what is the giveaway that they'll get?
Sure. Yeah. So Nourish Mindful Events is a company that me and my fiance, Sydney Smith, who's a plant-based chef, started. And so we learned that if we don't take time to nourish ourselves, we can't nourish anyone else. And so we started this company, Nourish Mindful Events, because we wanted to provide a platform for people to nourish their body, mind, and soul. And so we started out with our events being these 3-hour mindful experience, which also include, and I believe Jillian Hannah's on this call listening in, probably under the name Ryan Sheets, but she's a part of those events. And we offer these 3-hour experiences. The first hour is yoga. The second 30 minutes is meditation. We talk about meditation and offer some tips to make meditation more easy and effortless. And then we meditate for about 15 minutes. And then we cook a 3-course plant-based meal and we teach people about healthy living, or each one of the events is themed around a different topic. So one of them might be, overcoming addiction with meditation, or it could be, the power of plant-based eating, right? So each of the events is themed around a different topic. And so then we've expanded now, we have retreats. So we offer a week-long learn to meditate retreats, where part of the retreat is you get my comprehensive step-by-step meditation training that we talked about. And it's really a deep dive into those 3 practices. We also do an advanced meditation technique on the retreats, which is really like an industrial strength stress release. part of, as I said, the technique that I offer, it gives you rest 2 to 5 times deeper than sleep. And so it's a very powerful stress release. And so this advanced meditation technique, which consists of a specific yoga sequence and then some breathing and then the meditation and then a 10-minute shavasana at the end, really works to get rid of the amount of stress that somebody might get rid of in a year of meditating twice a day with the technique in a week. So it's very powerful to help you access that deep healing rest that starts to get rid of the backlog of stress we all have. And so we offer that on the retreat. You get 3 plant-based meals a day. And we just dive deep into the Vedic knowledge, do a lot of knowledge talks, and it's a week for people to nourish their body, mind, and soul. And so Nourish Mindful Minis, when COVID hit, we couldn't run those events or retreats anymore in person. So we created Nourish Mindful Minis, which is a 3-day exclusive online mini series where each day we send you some tips on how to make meditation more easy and effortless, and a little practice that you can do each day, a meditation practice. We offer a yoga sequence each day. And then my fiance, the plant-based chef, she offers a video on there of a plant-based recipe that you can cook to nourish your body.
Wow. Okay, awesome. So for those of you who did donate today and you get the bundle, then you can get take a screenshot of your donation, send it to us, and the 3-day mindful mini will be something that you get from that as well. So okay, so before you get out of here, can you tell us more about, so where can people find you? Where can they work with you? How can they learn more about what you're doing, brother?
Yeah, please. Just quickly, I wanted to just mention, thank you first of all for including the Jordan Hannah Recovery Group, which is the nonprofit that I just started with my fiance and also Jillian Hannah. As the charity that you would be donating to today, it's really meaningful. Our mission is to share the knowledge and experience of the teachings of yoga, meditation, healthy living, and diet with those impacted by addiction. And so one of the ways you can learn more about the Jordan Hannah Recovery Group is to go to the jordanhannahrecoverygroup.org. It's a really meaningful charity that we started because Jillian Hannah, who I mentioned, her brother tragically died of an opiate overdose. And in lieu of flowers, her family had donated me the money. So I took that money and I started a nonprofit in her brother's name. And so you go to the jordanhannahrecoverygroup.org. You can check out nourishmindfulevents.com to learn about our events and our retreats and all that we're up to. And you can go to georgespeterson.com to learn about my 4-day meditation training that I talked about on the call, and also to check out my podcast, Global Shift Podcast. I've had Julie and Jesse, 2 of the speakers you already heard on the podcast, and it's a great resource. We talk about addiction recovery, and as you're doing on this summit, offering resources for people to cultivate physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome, brother. And the links as well we put the links already in the chat box below. So your website, the Nourish Mindful, everything's in there.
Thank you so much.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. It's the beginning of a beautiful relationship, and I really acknowledge you for all the work that you're doing. And I have a strong intuition that this is just the beginning for you, man. So congratulations on the new book, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much. Namaste, and thanks to all the other speakers.
Yeah, you're welcome, brother. Okay. All right. So